This video was made possible by Blitz Esports. Blitz Esports is a free and easy to use desktop app to help provide all of the stats and information you might need for League of Legends. The app is automatic and integrates smooth like butter into your gameplay. It's much easier than having to look up the information manually, and you'll receive much more detailed information with Blitz Esports as well, which does include suggested builds and runes, champion stats, and scouting notes for both your opponents and teammates. And at the end of the game, you can see a detailed post-game analysis with feedback badges that sums up your performance each game for an easy self-review. Personally, I've been using the app a lot and it's proven to be a really awesome tool for me, so I'm super happy to be promoting them. The info with Blitz is entirely comprehensive, so it fills the role of multiple other websites and tools combined, as well as a few extra things too, in a way that's really convenient and easy. It's completely free and doesn't have any ads either, so you don't have to take it from me, you can just try it out for yourself and see if you like it or not. Check it out at the link in the description, and thanks again to Blitz Esports for sponsoring our channel. What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. We definitely make a ton of videos talking about the specifics of upcoming reworks, but there are honestly so many that it can be really hard to stay on top of what's going on. And so to fix that today, I wanted to make a list kind of style video where we talk about every single champion that Riot currently wants to rework, with a little bit of our expectations and the thoughts of either the Riot developers themselves or the direction that the community might prefer things to go with those reworks. It's worth noting that other champions, of course, that are not in this video may also receive changes or mini reworks in the future, but these champions are the main ones that Riot wants to do a full-scale visual and gameplay update for that they haven't already started working on. And if you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a like on it or let us know in the comment section below, and be sure to subscribe for some more videos. So up first for today, we have Dr. Mundo, who's a champion with some pretty serious potential when you think about what they did with Urgot. Although his percent health based magic damage cleavers and regeneration are very interesting niches, especially in terms of gameplay, his kit is pretty boring by current League of Legends standards. On top of that, his mad scientist on steroids theme is really cool and could definitely be highlighted more in his model, skins, and just overall theme too. Riot will hopefully take this opportunity to make him maybe a little bit less easy to counter, although it is important to have counterplay. A Bramble Vest or Executioner's Culling can essentially render Mundo pretty useless because they really remove his biggest strength overall quite effectively, so this is definitely going to be an interesting one to see how it plays out. Next up, we have Corki, who is pretty much not actually played that much anymore, despite having huge success in past metas of the game. Corki's niche has always kind of been his sort of magic-based damage. The mix between damage, physical, and magical makes him pretty difficult to itemize against, and I guess he does see a little bit of play in the mid lane too. The problem here is if you have an AP mid laner and a tank top laner, picking up magic resistance can't allow you to easily defend against most of the team because it tends to make up a huge part of Corki's damage. The build path you need to be useful with Corki is also very expensive, and a lot of Corki mains kind of just want to return to the old Gunblade days, when he actually used to be pretty strong as a niche pick. His art, of course, could definitely use some updating too, so Corki is a great candidate for a VGU, and it's good to hear that Riot are thinking of some ways to maybe breathe some new life into him into the future. And I think we're going to start to see a recurring theme here with pretty much all the champions on this list actually, is that pretty much all the champions, or at least most of the champions that we're talking about in this video today, are champions that were released with either the launch of the game or very early into the game's development. So it kind of goes to show that Riot just really wants to update a lot of their older champions in general. And with that said, the third champion listed as a high priority for a full-scale rework is Cho Gath. Like Dr. Mundo, there are definitely some things that Riot could do to really bring out his character a little bit more, but most players are currently just concerned about how much raw damage Cho Gath can deal while still being almost unkillable. Considering how much Riot deems to care about counterplay, it's actually kind of surprising that they keep nerfing mages or assassins, but allow tanks to exist that can match them in either terms of damage or versatility. The mid-season updates tweaks for AD carries will help out here by making marksman champions a much stronger counter for tanks, but ideally Riot will come up with a more creative way to give Cho Gath some presence outside of his massive AP ratios and true damage ultimate. Next up, we've got Fiddlesticks, who's a champion with a little bit of a dark and mysterious past. No, I'm serious here. If you guys have been around for a long time, you'll know that Riot's lore department way back in the day was just terrible, and with Fiddlesticks, among other champions, they kind of just chalked him up to having this dark and mysterious past because they didn't want to write lore for the character. Fiddlesticks' development of his story has really just not gone that much further as well, and start off with a new modernized appearance that maintains the same creepy scarecrow aesthetic, give him a much stronger backstory, and figure out a way to balance both his lane and jungle builds in a much more interesting way, and this could make for a really exciting rework actually. I know some writers have mentioned that they wanted to try to design Fiddlesticks' kit to be a lot more viable in a laning phase style situation compared to jungle. Fiddlesticks has been around for a long time, and although his gameplay definitely doesn't appeal to everyone with its kind of relative simplicity, he definitely deserves to get some attention, and I've got a little bit of a soft spot for him because he was actually the first champion I ever played in League of Legends, so hopefully this is one that turns out pretty well. Next up, we've got Cael, who is kind of another tier 1 or high priority candidate for a full-scale rework, and Cael's rework is one that probably can't come soon enough. Cael has been struggling for a while since her last batch of nerfs, and the Rageblade changes have affected her pretty heavily as well too. A lot of Cael mains kind of feel like Riot is maybe just ignoring Cael's problems because they're busy thinking about her rework. The two things that every Cael main seems to appreciate are her flexibility and focus on her auto attacks. You can play Cael in kind of just any role really with a number of different builds despite her being on the weaker side currently. Her gameplay is also pretty micro-intensive because you're juggling auto attacks as you kite backwards, so that's something that Riot needs to preserve to avoid community backlash. Something interesting about a Cael rework is that it's said that it will be accompanied with an additional rework to Morgana. Their characters linked by lore, so it does kind of make sense that changes to Cael's art or background are going to happen at the same time as Morgana too. So Riot have also mentioned that Cael's rework is going to come as kind of a dual rework with Morgana in the future. Now Riot have also mentioned that they want to do a rework on Kennon, who's another flexible champion like Cael who can kind of be built as AD or AP pretty successfully. A rework for Kennon would probably focus more on his art and background rather than the gameplay, because his gameplay is actually pretty well designed and has never been in too much of a toxic spot, but Riot might also want to explore and further develop his lightning ninja theme a little bit more too. I would kind of compare Kennon's situation maybe to somewhat of Aurelia's, where he's already a pretty awesome champion, but he just has a lot of room for improvement, especially in his theme. Kennon's passive stacks and stun give him a really cool niche and gameplay interaction too, and he does have the super exciting game-changing ultimate, but maybe his biggest weakness, I guess you could say, is probably his over-reliance on his ultimate as the game progresses. You can't really fight without it later on, and you'll definitely really struggle to win or escape a fight because your stuns can be a little unreliable too. Now next up, we've got Kog'maw. And Kog'Maw is a champion that honestly kind of just feels like he's on the list because Riot want to make up for the fact that their first rework with him kind of failed. Kog'Maw definitely occupies a really cool strategic niche as this tank buster and super hyper carry that also at the same time has this really heavy reliance from his team, but he also has his long range artillery ultimate as kind of a backup or some poke damage that definitely makes him really fun to play with. One of the major issues with Kog'Maw's kit is definitely his passive. Although it's way easier to die on Kog'Maw than a lot of other marksman champions, having an ability that only ever benefits if you die is not really that fun to play with, and definitely is a difficult way to ever get value out of your passive. If Riot could find a really cool, exciting new passive, I'm sure Kog'Maw players would be pretty happy with just a visual update though. Next up, we've got someone who's starting to look like they're going to be another rise in the making. It's Mordekaiser. Mordekaiser is due for yet another rework. Although it was cool to see Riot get creative and try to make an AD carry alternative for the bot lane, most Mordekaiser players were just really confused with why they chose him for their experiment. He's always been so known in the past, like the Season 1 days, Season 2, as this heavy-hitting AP juggernaut that kind of farms up and solos games. It's pretty weird to see him converted into a champion that can only really shine in a duo lane. Unfortunately, despite Riot's best efforts, the rework originally from him fell pretty flat, with the only redeeming feature being his dragon enslavement. Hopefully this rework will come with a new lick of paint for Mordekaiser, put him back on the throne as a solo queuer's dream, and maybe they can also try to preserve the bot lane synergy in the process. Nocturne's also up on the list, and he's definitely in desperate need of a full rework. His gameplay is quite dated honestly, and very lackluster compared to other AD assassins. And Riot could do a whole lot more with his Nightmare theme, but they definitely gotta keep his super iconic ultimate in his kit for sure. Now a lot of assassins don't have a super long range dash in their gameplay, but for Nocturne this can often just be dangerous for him. He has to commit essentially his entire gameplay to isolating a single target, picking them off, and unlike other assassins, he has really just no way to escape unless you manage to, I guess, somehow build enough speed with his Q or something like that, I guess. His sphere is also a little bit disappointing. It can be really easy to escape for most champions, or really just everyone if they have flash up. And Nocturne will probably always remain as a more linear character than most, but hopefully Riot can execute on his theme and make him a little bit more effective, also at the same time without touching his ultimate. Next up we have Pantheon, who's a champion that has really made his name by being this early game pub stomper that kind of just snowballs games if he gets an early lead. Whether or not his kit should be changed really depends on which Pantheon player you ask, I guess, but his model and skins and just his visuals definitely could be brought up to a higher standard. If Riot does decide to make some significant changes to his gameplay, it might be cool to see a little more skill expression on his kit, maybe in the form of changing his E to something more interesting. He's definitely very point and click, but that's also kind of an iconic development of his gameplay. It's also one of the reasons why he's such a good pub stomper. Maybe just giving players more counterplay against him in general though, while rewarding Pantheon players for landing abilities, might be a pretty interesting way to go. Now like Pantheon, Ramus is another champion with some pretty iconic gameplay elements. The sort of gameplay interaction between his Q, W, and E are all pretty well loved in the Ramus main community, so any changes to those might be a little bit on the smaller side. Now Ramus does actually have room to make some improvements on his ultimate though, so if they could make him have a more enjoyable ultimate, his gameplay could possibly see a lot of improvement. He's definitely in need of a visual overhaul for sure though, so it'll be cool to see which direction they go on with this one. So as with Ramus, we have another jungler due for a rework, and that is Skarner. Skarner has actually had some pretty okay reworks in the past, which added some interesting gimmicks that haven't really been that badly received, so I would guess that this is going to be more of a visual focused rework rather than just a few tweaks to his gameplay. A lot of Skarner mains might like to see him being more viable as a fighter for those games where all your lanes are dying before you can really start impacting the game, but he's also a pretty iconic Juggernaut champion, so they'll probably remain a little focused on that direction though. Now one of the trickier VGUs that Riot is looking to unleash is Shaco. Now Shaco is maybe one of the more divisive champions in the league, and he's actually had a rework that was attempted in the past that actually got cancelled because they couldn't come up with a solution that they were satisfied with. Now despite Shaco's kind of odd gameplay kit, he's really versatile and he can be played in a few different ways to good success. A lot of players really dislike his early game hard carry gank jungler style because it can be really hard to play against if you're against a pretty skilled Shaco, and lane Shaco with the Illuminati triangle isn't that viable these days. That being said, both of these playstyles can be easily countered with some early control ward purchases or some really smart gameplay. So Riot will probably be looking for ways to preserve his trickster gameplay without allowing him to be too dominant early or too easily countered. It's going to be a pretty difficult one to pull off, which is kind of obvious by the fact that he's had a rework cancelled already, but I'm definitely excited to see what they can do with him. Shaco mains are probably super nervous about this one though. It's the kind of thing that could be just Riot's best rework ever or just a total absolute failure. Now next on our list we have Udyr, who actually, like Shaco, has also had a rework in the past that got cancelled. And we're expecting probably yet another visual focused update with maybe fewer gameplay changes than usual, although he definitely might get some tweaks here and there. He's in a strong position in the game and has kind of always adjusted to patches reasonably well, despite his linear gameplay style. Honestly, you kind of either just love or hate Udyr, and that probably won't change, so there's not much sense dramatically changing his gameplay to try to appeal to a wider audience, because it's just going to let down the current Udyr mains. A lot of Udyr mains seem to enjoy the idea of maybe a stronger gap closer, but being able to kite Udyr is kind of the main consistent way to counterplay him, so I'd have to say that's probably unlikely. And next up we have Volibear, who's another character with huge potential that just isn't really being delivered on. Volibear's backstory kind of paints him as this shaman demigod who wields the power of lightning, but his kit definitely fails to deliver on that archetype. He flips people like a bear, he can slap people like a bear, and he can roar like a bear, and then he has some lightning bonus damage on his auto attacks. It's actually pretty disappointing when you think about it. Of all the champions we've talked about today, Riot definitely can get the most creative with Volibear for sure, and hopefully he'll come out looking like a badass too. Either way, that's just going to be the end of our list of the recently confirmed champions from Riot themselves that they want to rework. And of course, this list did not include mini reworks. This list was strictly limited only to full-scale visual gameplay updates. Hopefully this will act as a good reference for you guys moving forward if you're ever wondering which champions are in the potential running for a rework in the future, and who knows, maybe a year down the line, the list will have changed completely, and I'll be making another video. Either way, it looks like that's gonna be it for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.